Hello everyone, this is Robin with Robin's Creation, and I have my first alternative I want to show you that I made with the March 2021 Here's to You Paper Pumpkin Kit. If you're new to my channel, I'd really appreciate if you would subscribe, and if you would like notifications, to tap the little bell below and to see future videos that I may produce. So let's get started with how I created this card using the kit. With this month, March 2021, is an anniversary month for Paper Pumpkin. So we usually receive something a little extra. And this month we received 4 stencils. Some clouds, the mountains, and a starburst for like sun rays, and some stars. So today I want to show you how I use the mountain and cloud scene to create this card, also along with the stamp set that we received. So to begin with, you'll start with a piece of scrap paper. So I have one that's not mounted on a card yet that I can kind of go over with you at first. So I started with a piece of basic white paper that's 3 5/8 inches long. These stencils are about 3 3/4 wide, so I made it just a little bit smaller so that I could be sure to color all the way to the edge of my paper. So that's just a tip for that. Now before we start, I want to show you that I did do quite a bit of practice. I do like how this mountain came out, but then I got a smudge there, so that kind of toasted it. And then I tried with different colors, and that's what I got. Okay. So to start with, I stamped the tree that was one of our stamp sets on a piece of basic white paper, and then fussy cut it out, and that's what this is here. But let me give you a little tip. I highly recommend that you invest in a package of basic white paper for your stamping. It gives such a much more smooth and clean picture. To compare, let me show you. So this is just a piece of, I don't know, it is cardstock. I don't know where I got it, but it's not quite the quality. It's the same, maybe a little thicker, but when I first stamped, this is what I got. Very splotchy. And so I stamped on the basic white. Same amount of pressure, same ink color, and I got a much more solid color. Then I took my stamp set, or the stamp itself, the trees, and I took a white eraser to them, not a pink, just a white. And this is a sand eraser that I have, and one end has just a white eraser on it. And I went over very lightly on my stamp just to remove any film that may have been there from manufacturing. Here it is. So I just went over it like that, and then go rinse it off to get rid of your eraser remainings. Okay, and then I stamped again on the cheap paper, I'll call it. Again, still splotchy, but as you can see on the basic white paper, it did have a few more spots here, but after I sand erase it, it's a complete solid image. So just to make your projects look better, you're spending the time to make them, I think this investment is highly worth it. And if you head to my website, there is a host code that you can use each month to purchase your products through me. Okay, back to the card. So the first thing I started with was the mountain. So let me see which way I flipped it. You can turn these, flip them, use them either which side. It doesn't really matter, just whichever look you're going for. So I started with this. And since there's a very fine line that you get to stay coloring in the lines, well, first of all, let me tell you that I laminated a piece of the 6x6 grid paper that's available for purchase, and that's what I use under my projects, just so I'm not inking up paper all the time. So to create this mountain, I started with, I used the Calypso Coral, which came in the kit, and I put it on the sponge. Forgot to tell you. You also received a sponge, one big sponge. I gotta put mine back together. So the video from Paper Pumpkin shows them cutting it in half and getting 4 pieces. Well, I cut mine into fifths. I like this size better. It's not quite as chunky. If you cut into 6, you get very thin. But how I cut 5 was I just cut to the center, made a Y, and then you're left with these 2 pieces, and then I cut those in half just by eyeballing it. So you create whichever size you like best. My favorite is 5. If you would like one for each color, of course you can see the color, but you can also put a tab. We used to have a tab punch, and that's what I use, but that punch is long retired. And I found the story label punch does pretty good. It does give you a little bit more to hang on to, especially if you're doing a big area and just want to do it like that. And you could just label it if you want one for each color, the color, or you could have one for orange, one for blues, etc. Again, if you go on a piece of scratch paper until all the color is gone, you can use any color. I just like dedicating one. So how I started with Calypso Coral was I took a spare block and I tapped the ink on the block just to have a color, don't know if you can see that, on the block. And then I pretty much picked it all up. And then I started very lightly, but before I started, since you do have just a small area here, I took a spare window sheet that I had and I placed it just below there so that if I went outside that mark, it wouldn't get on my project paper below where I want it. You could use any type of scrap paper, copy paper, just to cover that up. So again, after I'd inked my sponge, I started very lightly in circles, going around, making sure to get up to the edges so it's defined, and then I slowly added more pressure to apply more color. And you can always add more ink if you would like it stronger or if it runs out. Okay, and then I wanted to put these accents on it, and I realized I should have used this mountain because those perfectly line up, but I didn't want this project to go to waste. So I just flipped it over, and I put the peak, you can't see because that tree's there, I'm sorry, and then just moved my project around until I had the places that I wanted accented. And how I did the accenting, I believe that's about what I put there, is I took a little darker color. This is Terracotta Tile that we received through Paper Pumpkin. I believe it was December 2019. You could also keep doing your Calypso Coral, and as you build color, more and more color, it would show up. So I did take my Terracotta Tile sponge directly to the pad, and then I just pounced. I didn't rub because this stencil has really fine, sharp, although not to cut you sharp, pieces that would snag your sponge, and so I found that just sit there and pounce, lift up to see if it's enough color, and if not, then just keep pouncing on color until it has the effect that you would like on it. So that's the Calypso Coral Mountain. The next mountain that I did was this one here, and I used this larger piece here. And usually when I do this, I take a piece of washi just to hold it down, and then I can use my hand as well. So this color I used Crumb Cake. Crumb Cake has not been a Paper Pumpkin color that I remember. So another economical purchase is they sell a set of 5 ink spots, and blank ink spots. And as you can see, that's how I created this Seaside spray that we'll get to later. And you can purchase the re-inker, and those re-inkers will last you a long time. So then you can add colors to your collection that have not been Paper Pumpkin colors if you are only a Paper Pumpkin subscriber. So I did the same technique in Crumb Cake that I did with the Calypso Coral. This is an old style pad, so I didn't have to take this whole thing and put it on a block. I just squeezed the pad to get a puddle here on the lid. And again, I took a dedicated crumb cake sponge, rubbed it all around to pick up color, get these out of the way, and then started very lightly. Actually, let me show you how I started first. I have to get this up. So you don't go over your pretty Calypso Coral mountain that you just created. I gotta figure out which way. Yes, I had it like that. If you shift it down, notice you have the direct mirror image of that mountain. So to start with, I did start there. I lined that up, taped it down, and went just along the edges lightly to get some color and build that up so I didn't have to go into my mountain. And then when I did this mountain, I just lined it up above. So again, did all that coloring. And then you sometimes have a little line, and you can kind of see it, but I wonder if I hadn't pointed that out, if you would see it. Then you just take your sponge and you keep blending on that line until it somewhat disappears. Again, it's landscape. I think it looks fine just like that. So the next part that I worked on was the clouds. So this is our cloud stencil. And how I did this was I used Seaside Spray, and this is an ink spot I created myself from an uninked ink spot. So I lined this up, got my dedicated blue sponge, and for this one you want to pinch it pretty tight because you want just along the outside of the stencil of the clouds so that you're left with some white space. And then I just moved it around, did the same thing. And for this bottom layer, to have a variety of clouds, I think I used this one just to help define those clouds. So each one is going to look different, and that's fine. It all shows that they're handmade. And just so if you start out and you're getting frustrated, know that I started out practicing as well. I really liked the mountain, and I was so disappointed when I got brown up in the sky. So this one was trashed, and there's probably about 3 or 4 of these laying around, but I just wanted to show you that it takes a little bit of practice to feel comfortable doing it. Okay, so the next thing I worked on was this pond, and I found that this mountain worked good as a pond. So I put it there, and so you have just a little bit of space there. So that's where I would put a piece of scrap paper or some other window sheet just to cover up so that when you're making your pond that you don't get blue. Blue may not show because it's much lighter than your Calypso Coral, but just to be safe, you may want to do that. You have quite a bit more space here, so I didn't worry about covering that. So this, I did the same thing. I put a puddle of ink on a blank block, picked up my sponge, picked up all the color, and started very lightly doing the coloring. And then work in little circles. I think it makes it smooth. On this lake, I do believe I used my blue blending brush. So I do love these. They make it easy to color. So I picked up the color off the block and I just started like that on this pond. I think it gives the same. This one I use the sponges. I think I may have just applied a little more color, but whichever you find easiest. These are amazing for working with any kind of stencil. These mountains are pretty small. You might have a hard time blending in there. You'd probably have to put more scrap paper around just to protect your project, but these are easy to work with. They are on back order, but hopefully we'll be receiving some soon, so you can order those. By the way, if you'd like to purchase any products through me, If you go to my website, which will be in the description box below, I have a host code each month that you can use to purchase products and it through me. All right, so we've created the lake. So the next I put just a little sandy area for Becca, and I use, for lack of better words, and I use Sahara sand ink. For this, I used a sponge dauber, and I just kind of went around the edge. I only used a sponge dauber because I didn't have one dedicated, one of these dedicated, and I wanted a fine, just a little bit. Again, you could take your sponge, pinch it so that only just a little bit is showing, and create that beach. Okay, and then I did the same thing for the grass. I used Pear Pizzazz, which again, if you've been a Paper Pumpkin subscriber for a while, you should have that in your collection. I believe it came out in 2020. And I made a little grassy area, and I did this in circles. And I don't know if you can see, but it's kind of whimsy, like grass. And I was pleasantly surprised by that. Okay, and so then I put my fussy cut trees here, and then I stamped the birds from the stamp set in Pretty Peacock. And again, I believe this came out in 2019 in a Paper Pumpkin kit. Okay, so just as a side note, Pretty Peacock, Seaside Spray, Terracotta Tile, and then Rococo Rose that we have used, that we received previously, those will be retiring in colors. That will start retiring. I think this week they'll announce the retirements, but as soon as that's announced, one of the first things to go are the refills, and sometimes the full-size pads. So if you have these colors and love them and want to use them in years to come, I'd highly recommend you jump on now and purchase yourself a refill for these, and maybe some uninked ink spots to create your own other colors. So that is my project. So by the way, one more tip, when you're working color to color, I highly recommend some baby wipes that you clean these off each time, or you will get, like I got, smudges all over your attempts. So that's my tip there. Each time you change colors or move your stencil, you're going to want to clean that off. You can run it under water, but then you have to dry it. I find a baby wipe works really good just to keep nearby. Okay, so I mounted this onto Pretty Peacock cardstock, measuring 4 by 5 1/4. And then I used a saying from the stamp set: may your journey through life take you to many new and exciting places. I thought that sentiment was perfect for this. And I do take, because this was Basic White, I do take and sponge along the edge. Here is one that I have ready to go for this card. And I just take a sponge and go like this to give it some color. This one I mounted right up, and then I flagged the end. I may do this one different just to have a variety. So there's my project for today. I thank you for watching this video. And again, if you're new, please subscribe to my channel. And then I'll have a link to my website in the description box below. And you can subscribe to it as well to receive notifications of any new posts. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.